Hello, everyone. I'm Dana Perino, along with Kennedy, Harold Ford Jr., Jesse Waters, and Greg Gutfeld. It's 5 o'clock in New York City, and this is The Five. Brand new federal charges filed against a suspected gunman in the White House Correspondents' dinner shooting. Cole Allen, a 31-year-old teacher and engineer from California, is now charged with attempting to assassinate the president. That's a crime that could bring him life in prison. He's also facing 2 other firearms charges. The shooting now marks the 3rd attempt on Trump's life in just 3 years. Here's D.C. Attorney Jeanine Pirro outlining how the suspect's manifesto proved he was targeting the president.
Make no mistake, this was an attempted assassination of the President of the United States, with the defendant making clear what his intent was. And that intent was to bring down as many of the high-ranking cabinet officials as he could. This is the kind of situation that we cannot tolerate. He says, I am targeting the administration officials. They are my targets, and I'm prioritizing from the top down, the highest ranking from the lowest. And I will not hesitate to get involved in any kind of encounter with anyone who blocks me from the president.
Despite the terror, President Trump telling 60 Minutes how he wanted the show to go on, even fighting Secret Service to let him speak at the dinner.
I wanted to see what was happening, and I wasn't making it that easy for him. I wanted to see what was going on. And by that time, we started to realize maybe it was a bad problem. Some of these people, they may be crazy, but they're not stupid, and they figure things out. He ran 45 yards, they say, and he just went to it, and then, boom, he popped through it. I mean, he ran like, I think the NFL should sign him up. He was fast. When you look at it on tape, it's almost like a blur.
He had attended a No Kings protest in California.
No Kings. Yeah.
What did security tell you about what may have been his motives?
The reason you have people like that is you have people doing No Kings. I'm not a king. What I am, if I was a king, I wouldn't be dealing with you.
Much to get to. Jesse, let's start with you. Your reaction, your thoughts as to what happens now. We have one charge. There might be additional charges at the moment, but the president wanted the dinner to go on. He was overruled by Secret Service. He really had, I think his instincts were correct to try to not let somebody like this win.
Mm-hmm. What makes it so dangerous is these assassins are smarter. These aren't like low IQ lunatics. If you look at the people who have targeted the president and other Republicans, it's not like they're hearing voices and are disassociated from reality. These are well-educated people that are politically involved. This was a Kamala Harris donor. He was a No Kings protester. And the things he was saying in the manifesto are online, indistinguishable from what you hear in Congress or, I don't know, cable. So there are millions, tens of millions of people just like this guy. And he was highly motivated. He traveled across the country to kill. Well, who else did that? The guy who tried to kill Kavanaugh and Ryan Ruth. Mm-hmm. And you read the manifesto, and the motive is clear. And then you hear Barack Obama come out and you say, well, while the motive remains unclear, what? Mm-hmm. It's like Barack's a part of the cover-up. And the media is still trying to cover it up. They're saying, violence on both sides, you do lower the temperature. The violence is really going, for the most part, in one direction. You got Trump 3 times. You got Kirk. You got Kavanaugh. You got Scalise. Rand Paul's neighbor cracked his ribs. There was just another guy they had to shoot down by Secret Service because he tried to bust into Mar-a-Lago with a shotgun. It looks like the Democratic Party has become a violent revolutionary movement. It's not just the drumbeat of hate. You look at the streets, you look at BLM, you look at Antifa, you look at this anti-ICE stuff, torching Teslas. They had to throw down a senator for trying to lunge at a cabinet secretary. They had to kick out a congressman who was screaming his face off, brandishing a cane at the president at the State of the Union. So why are these people so angry? It's because Trump keeps kicking their butt, and they can't do anything about it. And he's pursuing an ambitious America First agenda. So because they're powerless, that what they're doing is inspiring their base to violently overthrow the government. And they're angrier more than ever because Trump responded with class. I would not have been able to do that, Dana. He got out there in a tux and didn't point fingers. He came out and said, listen, it was a night of love. We were all coming together, First Amendment, and this is why we need the ballroom. You'd think the media, after their own lives were in danger Saturday night, would maybe tell everybody, maybe get off the warpath, maybe police the Democrats for saying Trump's a dictator. They probably won't. So the only thing we can do is shut them down.
Kennedy, I think one of the scary things, too, is that we keep having these scenarios and that we say, well, thank goodness it wasn't worse. But how much more security could we have had at this place? Do you think that they call it a hot wash investigation will be enough to make significant changes? Or are these types of events no longer possible?
So I just assumed, like you, I've been at this dinner. I think this is the fourth administration where I've seen the president at this event. And we've also been when the president hasn't been in attendance. Security is always lighter when the president is not there. I assume because this is the first one President Trump has attended, security would be so much more intense. I was told the Hilton was going to shut down at 2 o'clock unless you had a ticket, a pass, or a hotel key. We booked a room at 3 at the Hilton on Saturday, had no problem getting in there. You know, the security was very lax in the lobby. And, you know, like Bill Maloogian and others, I was shocked that we could get down the escalators with our guests who didn't have tickets, get them into various parties. And, you know, it wasn't until we went through the magnetometers at the very end of the security protocol, which was really the only checkpoint. And, you know, again, no ID, nothing like that. And I was shocked that there was no bulletproof glass in front of the dais, because I assumed when I walked into the ballroom, that was the first thing that I looked for. And that kind of surprised me, given the number of cabinet secretaries, the 2,500 people who were in that room, and the high stakes, not only with the failed assassination attempts, but also the war with Iran. And, you know, the president is under an ongoing fatwa from Iran. So that was all kind of surprising. The thing that was not surprising was, you know, I was 2 tables away from the door when we heard the gunshots. And then when the Secret Service agents came through the doors, we knew exactly. That was the only unsurprising thing. We knew exactly what was happening in that moment. And everyone dove under the tables. I was next to the MS Now tables. They all dove under their tables. Kash Patel was at my table. He made sure that all the women at the table were taken care of. And, you know, there was so much uncertainty in that moment because we weren't told anything. All the press was in the room, and we couldn't get any information from the outside. And there was a lot of competing information as to what actually happened to the shooter. It was Jimmy Fallon's executive producer who told us that the shooter had been apprehended and not shot and not killed.
Can I just ask you one quick question? Had you ever been in a situation where you heard gunshots like that close?
Yes.
Okay. I have not, so we'll maybe talk in the
Yes, it was. So I shoot firearms myself. I've been to many gun ranges.
So you knew.
And yes, and you know, the difference between like a banging dumpster lid, we did hear plates falling because it was obviously a chaotic moment, but the rapid succession of 5 or 6 gunshots was unmistakable.
Harold, do you want to address any of the concerns about left-wing violence?
No, it's good to be with everybody.
Would you like to
Well, I'll tell you.
have the floor?
What I do want to address is, first off, I was pleased to see first of all, I'm pleased that no one was harmed, no one was hurt. The police officer, the law enforcement officer, apparently has gone home, and I trust is with his family and will hopefully find his way back to work soon. 2, I was pleased to see the president that night at the White House call for unity. I think we should all heed that advice. There's no doubt in the last 3 years, this is the 3rd attempt on his life. Just to remind everybody, a litany of things. You have 3 attempts on President Trump's life. You had Congressman Scalise in 2017 at a baseball practice and a charity event where Democrats play Republicans. You had 2 Democratic Wisconsin state legislators who were killed. You had one was killed and his spouse was killed. You had Paul Pelosi hammered in his house. You had in 2022 along with Kavanaugh. You had Governor Whitmer, a group of men try to kidnap her or put a plot together to kidnap her. Dana, I think it's more. And I hear Jesse, and I understand there may be an abundance of it on the Democrat side right now. I don't look at it that way. I think we have reached a point. And let me first say, I agree with you 100%. This should not have happened at this hotel. There was a lapse somewhere, and I'm hoping. I saw you this morning in the wash thing. The guy talked about the hot wash, looking at the best practices and what were not the best practices. But we have a rot in our country. There's something in our culture that is not right, where people believe whatever disagreement they may have or conflict they may have with someone, they want to escalate it right away and resolve it through violence. And I don't assign it to either party. There's no doubt the language on my side about President Trump has to stop. But a couple things can be true at once. It has to stop on every side. We can't say that Democrats are evil and Satan-like, and we can't say that if they win, they're going to be bloodbaths in politics. My dear pal here and I got into it a little bit last week because I just don't like. I think the name calling, we may not mean it, but some people may not digest it and interpret it and be able to handle it as well as others. You think we were just less than a year and a half ago, a guy came here, a young kid, Luigi Mangione, decided to shoot and kill a CEO of a healthcare company because he didn't like, presumably, the practices of that company. We have a deficit, a deadly deficit around people being able to understand if they disagree with someone, you don't shoot them. I thought President Obama, he probably got the message, probably said something too early and probably should come back and correct it because there's no doubt this kid did what he did to try to kill the president. But the fact that the main part of his argument was, and I think the president of Canada, the president of India was, you cannot resolve differences in a democracy through violence. And unfortunately, we are so steeped in that right now. It is frightening, Dave. It's absolutely terrifying.
I think one of the things about that, Greg, in terms of like the first part of Obama's statement, it reminded me of all the reports of terrorism that you say, well, now we'll never know. What could it possibly be?
Well, they're running away from this story because they know they got their fingerprints all over it. I disagree with Harold, with all due respect. A call for unity is not for us. We don't need it.
He called for it, though, Greg.
No, I'm just saying that it's not for me to hear. It's for your side. We don't need it because it's only a one-way thing. You mentioned some examples like the Pelosi thing, which is a mental illness thing. The Wisconsin thing, we still aren't sure what the hell happened there. The Whitmer thing was a plot. Who created the plot? That would take an entire special to go under. I disagree with Jesse. This guy did hear voices. They were Tim Waltz's, they were Ted Lieu's, they were Brandon Johnson's, they were CNN's, they were The View, they were MS Now. Okay, I think this is a helpful assassination attempt because it is the first one to show that you can be radicalized by liberal smugness.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.